I'm Dr. Craig Escude, the host of IDD Health Matters, a podcast where we talk about health, wellness, and health equity for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Hope you enjoy it. Hello, and welcome to this episode of IDD Health Matters. My guest today is Josh Muñoz. How are you doing, Josh?
I'm very well. It's Friday. We are at the One Voice Conference hosted by the American Association on Developmental Medicine and Dentistry. This is my first time at this conference, and it's been a blast to be around people that I consider to be my folks, the ones that understand it and understand how important it is to work with this population.
Well, welcome to the conference. I've been coming here for about 14, 15 years now or so, and it's a great conference every year. So, Josh, let's talk about what you do in this field of supports and services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. How did you get into this field?
Currently, I'm the Associate Director of Public Policy for First Place AZ. And First Place AZ is a supportive housing option for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Midtown Phoenix, Arizona. And really what we provide is a consumer-controlled property that people that want to live independently but just need a little bit more support to do so come and spend time with us. They sign a typical lease. It's no different than if you were to go and find a rental property where you want to live, except it's intentional. And the reason why we call it First Place is that many of our residents, it is their first time being away from mom and dad. So First Place may not be their last, but it's the first location that they're going to spend oftentimes outside of mom and dad's house. Some people decide that they want to stay at First Place forever. It can be their forever home. Others may decide that I want to transition into a more neurotypical space, something that's more integrated. That's their decision. But it's the importance of consumer control that makes First Place special. So what types of supports might someone get who moves into First Place? It's all specialized to the individual, and we make that clear. But some of the supports that can be offered are really centered around daily living skills, but also employment. And what makes First Place really special, in my opinion, is the intentional community life that surrounds not only the four walls of First Place, but how we intentionally integrate within our own community to make sure that if someone feels comfortable enough to stay in their apartment, then that's great. That's community for them. If they'd like to come out and make new friends, then we're going to represent that sense of perspective. But for folks to spend more of their time outside of First Place sometimes is the natural goal, because I believe that's true integration. And I don't think that those need to be valued in any particular way, but that's what really gets me going when I am at First Place and I can see that a new resident who was shy, didn't have friends moving in here, has one or two friends and started going to community life events hosted at First Place. And then suddenly they're going to Arizona Diamondbacks games, or they're going to concerts and they're working. And suddenly maybe they're not spending as much time at First Place, but they started there and then they really started blossoming outside of that.
You took the words out of my mouth that I was going to say. Those supports can change over time as well, too, depending on the person's comfort level and the experiences that they have and becoming more comfortable, being more integrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And things that skills were considered mastered at some point, depending on life circumstances, can be targeted again. And as we said, this is not something that needs to be accomplished within 1 or 2 years, although sometimes families will come in and say, this is what we can afford for this amount of time, so this is what we want you to focus on with my son or my daughter. But we want our residents to be self-directed, because that's what we really try to promote.
That's great. So what is your background, training-wise, or how did you come into this field altogether?
I'm originally from California. I moved here when I was 19, and I was pursuing a degree in psychology. I was really fortunate to be in a class with Professor Leah Doan, who's a developmental psychologist at the Arizona State University. And there was a day that she told us there is a company, Applied Behavior Analysis Therapy, that I had never heard of before, despite having family members with autism growing up. And she let us know, you can go to their open house, you can practice interviewing in a clinical setting, and maybe you'll be offered a position. Regardless, you'll get class credit for going. So I figured, why not?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll prove my dad wrong that there is a career in psychology without sinking myself into a ton of medical debt. So I decided, let's go. And that day I was fortunate to be interviewed by the corporate HR representative who was there that day. And I just told them my background, my family story, and how eager I was to work with this population. 2 weeks later, I was hired at the age of 19.
Wow.
And what's interesting is that this was only 2 years after Arizona had passed Stevens Law, which mandated that insurance coverage be provided for applied behavior analysis.
Okay.
So you had a huge surge in demand and a low staffing ratio. So in essence, they were looking at the universities to say, do you have students that are eager with this population? We'll train them. But we just want folks that are willing to work with so many of our clients so we can start really giving the services that are needed. So I dove in with all my limbs, and because I was one of the only males in the office, any aggressive client that came through our doors, Josh was going to work with them. And I quickly became the aggressive behavior specialist within our office. And at the time, we were really specialized within individuals, which we now refer to as profoundly autistic, profoundly or severely impacted by their autism. So that was my forte. I loved working with those families because I knew that they needed the most support and they weren't getting it readily. So that was really where I found my footing within ABA. And ultimately, I transitioned into teens and adult services with lower to moderate support needs. And then I started working in the community as a job coach, still within the fundamentals of ABA. And that's what led me to First Place. I was looking for something that was more steady, where I didn't have to commute as much, because that's one of the hardest things as an ABA therapist. And First Place was a residency, but what First Place also offers is a 2-year transition academy, which supports individuals with ABA fundamentals. And I was a therapist for 2 years. And then after that, I decided it's been almost 12 years and I haven't pursued my BCBA. I'm in my 30s. I need to figure it out. What am I going to do? Fortunately, there was an opening to become a curricula specialist, and my supervisor at the time said, we need a peer support curriculum that is specifically designed for neurodiverse adults because we don't have enough, and Arizona really wants one, and they certainly need it. So I established a peer support curriculum called Place for Peers. And because of that, I had a ton of experience working with medical policy manuals, and I understood what happens at systems levels through that and through RFIs, through the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And then I was welcomed to participate in an NIH-funded I-Corps program that allows small innovative businesses to identify whether there's a suitable marketplace for their value propositions. And what we were particularly looking at is how could ABA be used within hospital settings to lower the rates of mechanical and physical restraints and high utilization of hospital stays and long stays at that for folks within Arizona and beyond. And that's really when I got interested in systems work. And
you've gotten into some policy work.
Exactly.
Related to that.
Yeah, so I'm now the director of the Daniel Jordan Fiddle Center for Public Policy at First Place, and that is something that allows us to publish a white paper and a public policy agenda once a year in partnership with ASU Morrison's Institute for Public Policy.
Okay, so what are some of the hot topics in public policy related to this field right now?
I think the low-hanging fruit is going to be Medicaid. And we'll see to what extent, because right now what's happening within policy circles is a bit of game theory in which we can anticipate as best as we can the impacts that this is going to have on individuals, understanding that some of the worst things won't be seen until 10 years from now.
Yeah.
That person making the decisions will be long gone by then in terms of not being in this office. So we will have to rally around innovative ways on how we can provide services and support state level funding, because it's always going to be the state that won't be able to sustain the cuts. And typically the first thing that happens is that they'll start looking at eligibility requirements, and then they'll start cutting down on services. And that's when you see the outcomes that are the worst for our folks.
So do you think that before the impacts get too challenging, that there might be some changes in a different way that could restore some of the potential cuts that might happen? Or not?
Well, and that's really my perspective on health policy in general, is that we need to concentrate on the social determinants of health that support people with IDD to be in a position where they don't have to overutilize their healthcare policies. And we spend a lot of time focused on healthcare promotion of education and training, and that's absolutely necessary. But if we're not fixing everything around the person's ecosystem, then all we're really doing is building a more compassionate, effective, and informed healthcare workforce that is still treating this wound that is going to bleed outside of the office continually. We want to build systems that address housing and community and employment, because that, I believe, is what is going to put someone in a position to not have to visit the doctor as much as they do now.
Yeah, we know that social determinants of health or non-medical determinants of health can be as much as, or affect as much as 80% of health care overall. I mean, it does have a huge impact if you can't, if you don't have transportation, if you don't have the right food, if you don't have a good, safe environment. All of these things really do have an impact on health. Mm-hmm. And I think, I like what you said. We can have the best medical system, but if we're not addressing other things that are very impactful to health, we may not have the outcomes we're looking for.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to discount the power of Medicaid. It is the only comprehensive healthcare system that people with IDD have. So it needs to be preserved as much as possible, but it's a conversation about the isms versus the ought be's. I think we have to start having a conversation more about the isms, meaning the things that are happening versus the things that we wish would. Yeah. And we have to be strategic about the way that we circumvent the things that are coming down the pike. Because there's only so much advocacy and policy work that we can do that's going to influence this administration's legislation. And hopefully, this is maybe pie in the sky, that there's ways in which when things get torn down, they can be built back up better. That's not to discount the disruption that's going to happen, but just trying to find that ounce of positivity everywhere I can.
The optimism, and I think that's important and valuable, and it's easy to become extremely fearful about every negative thing we hear, and many times when we look at all of the negative things we hear, they don't all come to fruition. Some of them do, some of them will, but my view is that we will work through whatever we have to work through, and we'll do things in the best way that we can. Struggles in this field are not new. Not enough funding in this field is not new. Right. We've been dealing with these things for a long time. It might be in a different way or at a different level, but we're going to work through these things and continue to move forward with improving everything in the way that we can. Support services, healthcare, for everyone, really.
Yeah,
that's kind of my view is how I look at it.
Yeah, agreed. And we talk about the proverbial silos that exist within health policy and healthcare systems, but there isn't any sector that is immune to those silos, and we need to build tri-sector superhighways where private, public, and nonprofits are working together to solve those issues. I think we need healthier civic engagement and civic life activities for folks to understand the impact that they have with their voting capabilities, and to understand what policies even mean before they vote for someone. Left, right, in the center, people have more power than they think they do with their vote. And because of that, I think we need to be promoting more accessible systems for people with disabilities to vote. So we have an initiative that's nonpartisan at first place called Vote the Spectrum, and it's specifically targeted towards making voting more accessible for people with disabilities so that they have a voice.
I'm Dr. Craig Escudé, President of Intellectability. State developmental disability agencies managed care organizations, and providers across the United States use Intellectability's health risk screening tool, e-learn courses, and person-centered training to improve health equity for people with IDD. Visit replacingrisk.com to learn more about how you can employ these tools with people you support. So Josh, I always ask guests to talk about 3 things that they would like the world to know, that they think can improve health, wellness, support services, just in any aspect of the lives of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I'm going to challenge you with that as well too.
This is apt because we're at the AADMD conference, and we've been talking about the need for policy to mandate training and education for healthcare providers. And we know the strength of building new cohorts of students and residents, but Craig, to be honest, I think we need to start even before that. One of the powerful things that we have here in Arizona is the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center's community schools, where they are intentionally integrating pre-K neurotypical students with students with autism. We need to get to a point where people with IDD aren't specialized but normalized.
Yep.
Because then policy won't be required for us to start building this radical infrastructure. I said it earlier, we need to substitute the question of, are we ready to treat this population, and substitute it with, why wouldn't we be?
Sure.
So start as early as we can. Another thing is treat people with IDD as if your son or daughter will be born with it. Because of the rates being what they are, it's possible. But even if it isn't, we need to start putting the level of humanity and love that we have for this population, because we picked up the mantle selectively, into the hearts of people that can demonstrate that radical empathy.
The other aspect of that is that any of us can become a person with a disability
100%.
at any time.
Agreed.
And we want an environment that would support anyone with any level of disability to the best extent as possible. Mm-hmm. So, and we could be part of that.
Yeah. I think I have one more.
Okay.
I always wanted to stress the importance of community building for folks with IDD. We've run some housing market analysis, and one that was done in Greater Phoenix was assessing the rates of loneliness and isolation for this population, and over 80% of the folks said that they were experiencing loneliness and isolation. It's really hard to take care of yourself when you know that there's not someone outside of your family or someone that you pay for that's willing to take care of you as a friend. Not just someone that you pay, although peer support is important and mentorship is important, but to strengthen community supports that allow someone to feel like there's someone out there for them that cares for them. I think that we'll see a radical reduction in healthcare cost, as well as quality of life, when we're able to promote friendships that are meaningful. And I know that sounds just so tip of the nose, but not enough of it is happening.
No, I agree with you. Yeah. Totally. Those are 3 great things that you brought up, and I think we could probably talk for hours about a lot of stuff. So what we may have to do is have you back on again at some point. Would you be willing to come back?
Anytime.
All right. You heard it there. Thanks, Josh, so much for joining me today. The IDD Health Matters podcast is a production of Intellectability. Learn more about our health risk reduction tools and training for supporters of people with IDD by visiting replacingrisk.com.